Hello, welcome to the All or Nothing podcast. Our official sponsors are KR Couriers and Transport Limited. This is a Northwest based courier company delivering all across the UK. They can assist in home moves and removals to large, heavy and bulky items, collections and drop-offs. Fast, safe and reliable deliveries. Please get in touch for a free quote. You'll find all the information within the description. Thank you. Hello everybody and welcome to the Billy Moore podcast. And today's special guest is J.M.Kane, who's got a great story, interesting guy. Right, I've been looking forward to this, to be honest. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself growing up and what was going on in your life.
Yeah, I was born on the Isle of Man. But at 6 months old, my parents had gotten divorced, left me with my grandmother, my paternal grandmother. And for reasons of only her knowing, she decided to have me sent away. So I was shipped to Liverpool to be put on a ship to be sent to Canada. And I went to an orphanage in Canada called St. Joseph's Orphan Asylum, ran by the Grey Nuns of the Cross. And within a few months I got there, apparently I got ill. We found out in some letters. But a woman who had worked for my grandmother, a young gal, took me over there, and she was staying at the same orphanage working. And she saw things that were happening at the orphanage. One, it was a place that later got connected to the Duplius orphan scandal, which was where they were selling children to be indentured servants to Canadian farmers. They were adopting children out legitimately, but then if they had too many children, they would put them in the mental hospitals that they ran both in Canada and America. And if you take a normal child and you put them in a mental hospital for 30 or 40 years, they become what they're around. So the girl saw that, decided that's not what she wanted for me, so she snatched me up and took me into America. And before my mother had left the Isle of Man to come back to the UK, over onto England, she had left this girl her passport and told him that when I turned 18, if I wanted to find my way home, to give it to me as a cookie. And so instead, the girl used it as her identity. She took my mom's picture out, put hers in, took over. And so she raised me as her son for about 13 years. And then she worked, she'd been trained in silver service over here. And she'd worked in my grandparents' hotels and stuff. And so she got odd jobs doing work for well-to-do families in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And one of those families, they had adopted a boy and a girl. Something happened to the boy, and he just disappeared. And to this day, nobody knows what happened to him. But she was getting real ill from too much drink and bad men and relationships and stuff. And they offered her money and said they would take care of me and give me a good life. So she did the deal with them. I went to live with them. They gave me this child's identity, and told me I was adopted. Not knowing how adoptions went, I believed him. The man happened to be a guy who had served in the served in the Air Force with the RAF over here, but he was actually only did 3 flights, and then he became part of the OSS, which later became the CIA, and he was friends with a guy named Richard Nixon. He used to go visit him in San Clemente, visit him in Washington, and then he was also friends with a guy named G. Gordon Liddy, who was one of the Watergate plumbers, the only one that really didn't talk and did the most prison time. He used to come to the house. But I didn't really know who all these people were because I didn't care. I was a teenager. I don't care what adults are doing and stuff. I had my own life going on. But I left school. I went into the military. I became a Navy corpsman with the Marines. And I served under that child's name, which later became a big problem. But I get out of the service, honorably discharged and all that. And then I get married. My first marriage falls apart, but I've got a young son. My wife doesn't want anything to do with me or him, leaves me with him. And then about a year and a half later, she comes back. Her parents want her to take the boy. Well, this guy, Dr. Wetmore, the guy who bought me, came to me and said, look, I've got the judicial and the political people, you give them to me, I'll raise them properly and all that stuff. And I told him, you and I never got along. I'm not going to give my kid to you. It's just not going to happen. And in this haste of him getting mad at me, he threw an envelope at me. And in this envelope was my baptism certificate from the Isle of Man, St. Anthony's. It was the first time I'd had anything tangible. And there was also the passport that the woman had used. But this was the first thing I had that actually said I was from the Isle of Man. And so I took it. And about a year later, I lost the case. They took my son. I went kind of through a depression thing because, I was really trying to focus on, if I couldn't do anything else right, I wanted to be a good dad.
Yeah.
And so they took him, and I was connected to a motorcycle club at the time, so I kind of put myself more involved in that. Ended up getting married a second time, having another son. And then I just one day decided I'm going to get a passport. I'm going to come back to the UK. I'm going to see if I can find my family.
Yeah.
Well, word got to him that I was going to do this. And suddenly he started thinking, wait a minute. There's going to be questions asked. Where's he from? Where it happened to the other boy and all this stuff. And I knew my real birth name because of the fact that I'd lived with him until I was 14.
Yeah.
And so I'd actually started changing my name back by usage because my actual birth name is Morgan James Kane, but I go by Jamie Morgan Kane. And that's kind of the author, my author name. But because a lot of people called me Jamie when I was little, and when I first got back over here to the UK, I had quite a few English people that didn't want to call me Morgan because it's a Welsh name, and because I'm of English heritage. So I started calling me Jamie, and I've just gone with that. It's not a problem with me. So when he realized he was going to be a problem, it kind of came out to a situation where he had to figure out how to kind of put me on ice of some kind. And so what ended up happening was my wife ended up being charged with murder, 1 with 2 counts, special circumstances, which each one of those carries the death penalty in California. And me having been a corpsman, I'm the guy who runs through gunfire to pick up wounded Marines. So I'd always had this reputation of being somebody who would go to help anybody that was really in need. Not so much because I was the toughest guy, but just because I just knew that I could do things that other people were hesitant to do. Yeah. And so they take my wife and they try her, and the first trial they get a hung jury. 11 people were willing to convict her and give her the death penalty. One guy had a problem with them putting her to death. He said straight up to him, if all you wanted to do was put her in prison for the rest of her life and let her die in prison, I could do that. But he had a conscious thing about a woman being put to death. So they were going to retry her, and they came to me and said, look, here's the deal. We know you didn't have anything to do with that, but we believe that you probably know about other stuff around and about, and because your wife and you are the head of household, and California's funny about that. The head of household, whether it's a single house parent or a married couple, whoever head of household can be held responsible for things. If there are kids doing drugs and selling drugs out of your house, you as head of household could be found negligent and do prison time for it, things like that. So they came and they said, here's the deal. And you got to make a decision within 15 minutes. So we're going to try your wife again. If we find her guilty, she'll be given the death penalty. So you got about 10 minutes to make a decision. We're going to offer you a one-time deal. It'll only take 13 years. We won't oppose any parole. And you'll be out in time to see your son graduate high school. And so you've got 5 minutes. And oh, by the way, who do you think could do prison time better? You, an ex-vet, biker, or your wife who's just a housewife and stuff like that. Oh, and by the way, you got 90 seconds and I walk out of here. And my attorney, my wife's attorney, were sitting there and they said, this is the best deal that's going to come down the pike. And the guy says, how are you going to explain to your son you had a chance to save his mom's life and you chose not to? Is that really what kind of guy you are?
So they put you under a lot of pressure at that point,
Under a lot of pressure, yeah. It was like 15-minute countdown, and it just time was kicking off faster and faster. And so, for better or for worse, I took the deal. And so I was going to do 13 years. And then 3 years after I go in, the first thing they did took all the good time credits from us. And suddenly, instead of 13 years, I was going to have to do like 19 years because I couldn't earn any good time. Then the next thing, they gave the governor a right to take your date. Well, then I had to go to parole hearings. And because they had a new district attorney, he did oppose every parole hearing because he wasn't a part of the deal.
What age was you when you went in?
I was 30. And that was one of the things that kind of made it easier for me. I was 30 years old. I had all the tattoos I've got on now.
Yeah.
I never got any in prison. So all my tattoos were there. I owned my own bike shop. Like I said, I've been riding with a bike club, ex-vet. So when I came to prison, guys saw it and they assumed I had done time before. So that kind of gave me an edge. Plus, I was 30 when most of the guys going in were in their early 20s.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, because all I was focusing on was getting back out, it was said many times in prison they couldn't understand how I never became institutionalized. I said, well, I was never a criminal before, and I didn't choose to become a criminal inside because I expected one day to get out. Didn't know how long, didn't expect it to be as long as it was. But, so for me, I just focused on getting out. But that was one of the reasons why when guys came up and tried to pull me into their stupid stuff, that I tended to respond quickly. And
so what was the charge you were actually given? What was the...
my initial charge was conspiracy to conceal a murder. That's what they got me for. And because they had the murder...
And you actually weren't the perpetrator of that murder?
Pardon?
And you weren't the perpetrator of that murder?
No, the only participation I had in anything was I came home and I found the body in my living room.
Yeah.
And not knowing... I knew he was dead because I'd been a medic. I knew he was dead. I didn't know how he was killed because there were no wounds on the body. But he had been arrested a few weeks earlier for assaulting one of the girls that I thought was my half-sister and her little 3-year-old son. So he was in jail, and I told my wife, don't let this guy come around if he does get out, period.
So he was known to you?
And so suddenly he's at my house, and he's dead on the floor. My wife's not there. My kid's not there. I don't know where they are. But my first thought was, I got to get him away from the house. And he and I had physical altercations a few times. A couple times he pulled knives on me, and we had these where I ended up putting him in sleeper holes and stuff. But because the police were never there when it actually happened, when they came, it was all over and done with, and neither of us pressed charges. They just left it alone. But I knew that there were reports that this had happened. So my thought is, if I call the police, I'm going to jail. No matter what, I'm going to jail. And I just didn't want to be bothered with it, quite honestly. So I put him in a sleeping bag, put him in the back of my truck, and I was going to move him away from my house. Just as that happened, my wife comes driving in real quick, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here." She goes, "He came over, I gave him some dinner, and then he collapsed." And she goes, "All I could think to do was take the baby and get out." And so she took our son over to a friend's house. So then I got in the truck, and she jumps in and go, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm just going to get him away from here." And I start driving. And for the next 4 hours, she's yelling in my ear, "Well, what are you going to do? Did you bring a shovel? How are we going to get, how are you going to get rid of this? How are you going to call it? You got to fix this. You got to fix." And I'm trying to think, and stuff. And I've got this just in my ear the whole time. And she goes, "You didn't bring a shovel?" I said, "Well, no, this is not something I had any intention. I came home. I didn't know." So as it started to get a little dawn, because it was really late, it was like midnight when we got it going. I pulled up alongside an agricultural field, and I actually put him out and I set him up against a post. And for whatever reason, and people will say this is stupid of me, but at the moment I thought, well, I want to make sure he's identified and, the body's treated right. So I actually wrote my name and phone number and put it in his in case of emergency, stuck it in his wallet. And he was found within hours because first farm workers coming down the road saw him there, and they called the police and stuff. And the thing was, the initial autopsy came back that he'd been strangled. That's what it came back as. And they originally arrested my wife and the girl that he had beaten up, because 3 days after he was dead, they went out and started forging checks on his bank account. The girl, because she said he was taking her money and she wanted her money back. My wife, because she's driving her around. I don't know about this yet. And I got charged as an accessory because they were using my truck and they put petrol in my truck. So I got monetary gain because they put petrol in my truck. So the way it worked out was they got arrested for that first. And they threatened the girl with 18 years for forging the checks because they proved it was her signature, and then she made them out to herself, And the banks did have cameras at the time, and she was the one who went in and cashed them. It was a pretty open shut case. So then she tells them, yeah, but the other girl poisoned him. And so they then run a new autopsy, and then they find out that the guy was being killed with cyanide poisoning. Funny enough, they were in asthma capsules that the girl had and had given to my wife to take to the county jail to give to the guy when he was in the jail. And that shows you how silly people were.
It was all premeditated.
Well, there was a lot of premeditation.
Yeah.
So it was surmised that we later found out that Dr. Wetmore, in his statement to the immigration about me, had said that this particular man, John Kearns, had been the one that took the other boy away. So it was believed that he likely, when he got arrested for the assaults, he called Dr. Wetmore and said, look, if you don't get me out of this, I'm going to tell. So it's believed that Dr. Wetmore got the pills and gave them to the girl, but she had a restraining order, so she couldn't have any contact. Gave it to my wife, took him down to the county jail to give him. The problem is that I'm sure you were well aware of, but apparently they weren't. You're not allowed to walk down to any kind of jail and just give drugs of any kind to prisoners. For some reason, I don't know, the staff frowns on you going, oh, yeah, these are headache pills, and gives them. No. So they wouldn't accept them. So she had him at the house. So what I found out later is she fed him a chicken dinner, and then she'd given them these capsules. He took one of the capsules and within moments collapsed dead. Well, the interesting thing is that nobody knows what happened to those capsules. I never saw them. They weren't in the house when I came home, which means that likelihood my wife got rid of those capsules. Whether she knew or not what was actually in the capsules, I don't know. She later told somebody in the county jail, one of the girls, that she actually thought they were supposed to make him sick, but he would get sick away from the house. But anyway, neither here nor there. I didn't know anything about all this. But they come back, and they'd already been talking to me about, well, you're the only guy we know of who was big enough to be able to choke this guy out. Well, now it's cyanide. And their suspect in the forgery is pointing their finger at my wife, saying, she's the one that did it. And so now they've come down that the only thing I did was basically move the body to hide the body, which wasn't hiding, but just moving it, and then lying to the police. Because the police asked me, when was the last time you saw him alive? And I said, about 3 weeks ago, which was the truth. They said, well, you lied. And I said, no, he wasn't alive when I saw him last. So I'm like, okay. But they kept me in the county jail, but they just kept changing charges. But when they ran the thing with my wife, the moment I took my deal, the DA did try to run my wife again. Her attorney ran right into the jury and said, wait a minute, I've got a confession here from her husband that he's taking full responsibility for head of household. The jury threw everything out. My wife gets released, gets my son back. They move out of state, and I don't hear from them ever again. 2 weeks later, I'm on my way to prison. Now I go to Vacaville first. Second day I'm at Vacaville, I meet Ed Kemper. He was working in the orientation thing. And I had heard his name, never had much interest in the thing at the time. But
he was a serial killer, wasn't he, Ed?
Yeah. Yeah, he ended up killing his grandparents, his mom, a bunch of co-eds. And he's like 6'9", 300 pounds. And when he did us, he came into the room and he spoke very monotonely. He goes, every man must have a moral compass. You must not deviate from that compass. And like the other inmates that were mainline inmates that worked alongside him, they were all like against the wall. Like they weren't sure about his mental state and stuff. And he's had a number of films and documentaries and been a big thing on. And then wasn't but another few days after that, guy tells me, hey, you want to see Charlie Manson? Tell him, oh, okay. Takes me to the Catholic chapel. We walk in, and they have a little garden. He goes, there he is, right over there. And same thing, I knew about the Manson killings and stuff, but I was a teenager. And again, it wasn't playing a big part of my life. So I look at him, and I realize he's just a little tiny guy. You know, he's like nothing.
Yeah.
But
he had some holds over some people, though, didn't he?
Well, but here's the thing. Because I later would meet Tex Watson and Bruce Davis and Bobby Booslade, the other 4 guys from the family. And in my take, I've always believed that Charlie just made a good figurehead. Because Charlie was a petty criminal before all this. Charlie never killed anybody, though he was supposed to have told them to do it. But the person who told them that, oh, Charlie says we got to do this, was Charles Tex Watson. Charles Tex Watson was a very personable, charismatic, tall, good-looking type guy. And he was the one that met and recruited most of the girls. And when I met him at the California Men's Colony years later, he was the inmate pastor at the chapel. And I've always honestly believed that it was more Watson saying, hey, Charlie says, and he's talking about himself, Charlie says do this. It's like Simon says. Then Charles Manson. But Charles Manson had the personification to be the crazy cult leader, all this stuff, because he always wanted to be something. I mean, he really wasn't anything. And so he had to be this. And so media made him the crazy cult leader. And so he played up to it. I'm the crazy cult leader. And, and Bruce Davis, his killing wasn't anything to do with the Sharon Tate stuff, but he killed another guy and stuff. But I met him, and quite honestly, out of all the people, he's the only one I thought was really redeemable. And, but Manson used to come stand by the canteen line. He'd have like painted rocks, and he'd want you to buy them. And
so he's lying about, was he just fucking totally nuts?
I think he was more nuts than anything else, because, I mean, one of the things that there at Vacaville, he got into a religious argument with a Hare Krishna guy in the hobby shop, and the guy threw paint thinner on him and lit him on fire. When the Hare Krishna guy will win the fight, that's kind of says something. And but he used to come to the clinic, and I worked in the clinic, and they'd be trying to get guys who worked in there to give him pills and give him needles and all this stuff. And I just tell him, go away and stuff. And he go, man, don't you know who I am? I'm more famous than fucking Jesus Christ, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. So what he'd do sometimes, he would come with a couple other guys, and he would just act all kinds of crazy and get all the staff focused on him. And the other guys would run and get to the med cart and steal stuff.
Yeah.
And that was one of his big things. But because he used to get thousands of letters, money, I mean, young girls that weren't even born when the Manson stuff happened would write to him talking they want to join his family. And because he'd get the money, he used to buy TVs for like some of the Aryan Brotherhood guys and some of the, so he was, in a way, he kind of paid protection and stuff like that along the way. But, I knew him for a couple of months, and I saw him more as a sad case of somebody who, for better or for worse, never had the chance to be something. And so he took whatever he was given, and he got this given to him, and that's where he went with that.
Yeah, that's like, it reminds me of like Charlie Bronson.
Yeah.
In the UK,
Mm-hmm.
He's never killed anyone, but he's been away from most of his life as a notorious, celebrity as well.
Yeah. Well, I watched his film as well, right? Because I'd heard about him, but I didn't really know anything about it. So I came over and I watched him and stuff. And I looked at the film and I said, the biggest problem here is that he keeps doing stuff just as when he looks like he's going to get something good, he does something and then
sabotage.
Yeah, sabotage is his own thing. I mean, he could be a great guy. I don't personally know him,
Yeah.
but
I heard he's a bit of a bellend, to be fair.
well, like I said, it's funny because like I knew guys who, when they were around certain groups of people, they were just absolute pricks. They would just be everything. And then but other people.
I had a friend, I won't mention his name, he was away with him for some time, and he said, you know what, the only opportunity we had to watch the TV was in a recreational room. He said, and when he came in and he'd be kicking off and he'd be causing murder, he'd smash the only telly, right, on the unit, which then would have an impact on everyone else. Yeah. But then what he'd do is go straight down to solitary confinement, end up in a block, right, leaving everyone like that, waiting, no more TV. So, the opinion of others, I've actually had a letter off Charlie a few,
Well, like I said, but so I watched his film, and I came in, like I say, at the end of it, I just basically said, well, he's what's kept himself in because he keeps sabotaging his opportunities. So
the name Charlie goes together, don't it? Charlie Manson, Charlie Bronson, they're all like
Charles Dix Watson.
Yeah, they all want to fucking stay away.
Yeah.
So they all want to.
Yeah. So anyway, but so that's kind of the thing, but like I said, but it was like I was probably in prison about 5 years before I went, man, what in the world went wrong here? Because it's kind of a wake-up call at some point. And kind of the first couple of years, I really stayed by myself and just made people want to stay away from me. But after that, I started seeing people that were being taken advantage of, and I've never liked bullies. And so I started stepping up, and because I'd already had a little bit of a reputation from my first few instances in prison, when people were trying to test to find out who I was, it gave me that when people say, oh, well, he'll do this, he can do that and stuff. But over the years, even after I stopped having to fight, because people remembered things, I could save a kid from things. And one of the things I used to tell the youngsters, because they'd say, well, I don't want to join up with this. I don't want to say, well, here's the real simple thing. The last thing any shot caller in any of the gangs want is somebody smarter than them. They don't want it. I said, so don't borrow anything. Don't lend anything. Don't gamble. Don't do drugs. None of that. Get yourself some books, not comic books, but get yourself books. Start learning things. Read all the time. I said, because then you're no longer valuable to them because you're not willing to mindlessly just follow what they tell you.
Yeah.
And so I had but I used to also do things like, having watched guys, I got to pretty good at telling who was going to come back. There was this one young guy, and he had a young wife, and they had like 4 kids already, and they were like not even 25. And she's out there trying to raise the babies, and it's been like his second, third time in. And he's like, I'm not coming back. And I told him, yeah, you are. I said, you'll be back. No, I won't. I said, you'll be back in 6 months. No, I won't. So he got out. He got 2 jobs. He went back to school. He was staying home. He stopped drinking, stopped doing any drugs. And it was like 9 months later, he got off parole. So he sends me a Christmas card going, just wanted to tell you, I'm off parole now. Ha ha, you were wrong. And I wrote back and I said, congratulations. And he goes, oh, you asshole, you tricked me. Because I put a challenge to him.
Yeah.
Because I told him, you come back. I said, I'm going to clown you.
I know that feeling. Like, I remember a screw saying to me, you'll be back. And I was like, no, I won't. And I went back to that prison probably 6 months later, full of shame. Mm-hmm. I holding my head low, and that was just...
Well, I had a lot of guys that came back because my last job in prison, I was working as a clerk for the psych department at Dual Vocational Institution, which is known as Gladiator School. And everybody who comes in, all new arrivals, have to come to the psych yard to be quickly evaluated. And guys that come back, they'd see me, they'd kind of like drop their heads and kind of go try to hide because they didn't want me to recognize them and stuff. But, I kept telling people, because there were one of the funny things, I don't know about over here, but in America, particularly California, guys who did drugs want to get degrees in being drug counselors so they can do that.
Like drug addicts.
alcohol counselors, and the guys, they want to work with the prisons and stuff like. I told them, I will never voluntarily walk back into a prison. I said, it's just not going to happen. And so my second trip to the Isle of Man, I get an invitation by the governor of Derby prison to come talk.
Yeah.
Well, I'd watched the series, The Best Little Prison in Britain, which was all about the Isle of Man. So I got to know who some of the staff were by name. So I go there, and it was so funny because they have a woman that was a security person named Margot Kane, but Cain. She comes running out, and she goes, Jamie. I go, Margot. Yeah. And she takes me in, and they're showing us around the prison. They tell me, yeah, our prison holds 119 people. Currently, we only have 89, but only 80 of them can come see you because of other reasons. And I was going, 119 people, huh? I said the last unit, the very last unit I was on, had 300 in a prison of 3,500. And I've been in a couple of prisons like Avenel at the time, had almost like 7,000. So, and then the other thing is the prison looked nothing like a prison to me.
Yeah.
I mean...
Castle.
Well, it was like an industrial block first. And the officers came out and they were really polite to me. I had a flat cap on. And the officer goes, you might want me to put that in safekeeping because it might get nicked from you. I go, what? They're gonna nick my flat cap. And he was like, good. Could happen. All right, here you go. Yeah. Because one of the things that's happened since I got out, well, it started happening about 10 years before I got out. I started becoming follically challenged. And going a baloney patch back here and then getting thin here. And I was one of these guys, I was never going to be doing the comb overs and I wasn't going to go get hair plugs and stuff. I decided when the hair goes, I'll just let it go. I'm not gonna, so now I shave my head and it's all good. But I wouldn't do that in prison. I cut it short, but I wouldn't cut it because I just didn't want to get tagged with skinheads after all the other kind of issues going on. But yeah, it's just thing. But I've been in touch with. There's a group on the Facebook, Folsom Boys, and I knew a lot of the guys on it, but they were guys who'd served time at Folsom, and I've been in touch with a number of them, and they've all gotten out and stuff, and they're all doing surprisingly well. I'd say probably about 87% of the guys I've talked to that got out have done a lot better than I have in some respects. Probably a third of them have owned homes now, and you got 3-4 vehicles and all that. But I mean, I can't say anything bad about my situation. I came back to the UK with 5 pounds in my pocket and told never to come back to the US because I'm a criminal alien, undesirable, is what Donald Trump had said when he deported me 4 years ago. For illegally being in the U.S. for 63 and a half years.
So how old are you now? How old are you now?
Pardon?
How old are you now?
I just turned 68.
68. And you spent 34 years inside.
Well, I spent 34 years inside, 63 and a half years in America. The interesting thing was, as I told you, I had my baptism certificate given to me.
Yeah, you mentioned that on the phone,
I never had a birth certificate.
Yeah.
My birth never got registered until this year. On my 68th birthday, I went back to the Isle of Man because the High Court, the first Deemster, the highest judge in the land, instructed the registry to do it. And they had me come over on my birthday. So my birth got registered on my 68th birthday. And I now have a birth certificate. And I filed with Guinness's to try to get them to give me a record for the latest birth registration in the UK in the Isle of Man. And I'll know that answer in about probably 6 weeks or so because it takes like 12 weeks for them to review it. But the Isle of Man did a full-page article. Newcastle Chronicle did a big article. So that's one more accomplishment I've done. Is getting my birth registered. And everybody said, oh, that'll never happen because the rule says you have to register it within a year, but if it's not registered in 45 days, then the people who are supposed to register it will get fined. Well, the people who were supposed to register it were my parents, and they're dead. So you couldn't fine anybody. You couldn't put anybody in prison. Though I had told the registrar over there, I said, if worse comes to worse, I'll have to file a police report against my parents take them to the court for not doing right, get a judgment against them, and then make the registrar, do it by that way. And the registrar's like, well, I don't know how that works. And I said, well, because I told him, I said, you realize that if I've never been born, I can't die. I must be an immortal. And I said, so if by chance I suddenly was deceased in your office, you can do a death certificate because I've never existed. And he's like looking confused, and he's like, yeah, I've never had this situation. Exactly. But it's been a long fight. But the fact that I got it, and they did it on my 68th birthday means a lot. And I'm going back in June for 4 days to actually see the TTs, because I was born right off the Hillberry curve of the TT track. And interesting enough, my grandparents owned hotels. And the first one they owned was called the Falcon Cliff. It looks like a castle, sits above the promenade. And in 1939, the German Nazi TT team stayed with them. And then in 54, when the Germans were allowed to come back, they stayed at the Halstrake, the other hotel my grandparents later owned. So, yeah, it's just, so bikes have always been in my blood as well. But, I like I said, from a little child, like I said, I kept being told that I was born on this magical, mystical isle and stuff. But my grandfather, my dad's father, is from Liverpool. He was born in Bootle and grew up in West...
Bootle.
Bootle. I don't know. I don't know if that's proper or not.
Bootle. I feel sorry for you. You're a fella being born in Bootle, by the way.
But he grew up in West Derby.
West Derby.
Yeah.
West Derby.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was one of the reasons why there. And then, like I said, Liverpool, the last time I came through here, I was 6 months old, getting on the ship to be sent away.
6 months old. Wow.
Yeah. So, but funny enough, I'd found out that apparently on the Isle of Man at one point or another, if children were bad, they were threatened to be sent to Liverpool, because this was where kids got sent to Australia. And so Liverpool was like the no place type thing, So
we get it, don't we? Like in Liverpool,
yeah.
But you still haven't got a football team yet, have you?
No, like I said, when I first came over, I was taking care of an older lady, and she kept telling me, well, if you're going to be over here, you're really going to have to think about football team stuff. And funny enough, most of the guys in California that I knew, for whatever reason, either the only two teams you ever heard the Americans talking about was Manchester United and Arsenal. That was it. Yeah. Never heard about any others. And so I didn't know a lot of them before that. And so when I was talking to her, she's like looking up my ancestry stuff. And she goes, well, your mom's side of the family's from Birmingham, and where they were living is basically Aston Villa area. And said, so you could choose Aston Villa. It says, or because your granddad's from Liverpool, you could choose a Liverpool team. Said, but you can't choose any others because you don't have family everywhere, And so it was this kind of thing here. And but what's funny in America, because I used to have a lot of Hispanic friends, I would always pick whatever Hispanic team was playing against the American team. I always supported the Mexican teams or South American teams, just because, just one more controversial thing. But and I have a few Mexican friends who have gotten out and been deported to Mexico, and they contact me through WhatsApp. And funny enough, one of the guys got down there, became a security guard at one of the luxurious tourist hotels, met a woman who was a police sergeant, and he's now a police officer, after having done 25 years for a murder, He's now a police officer in Mexico. Yeah, so it's like, okay, I mean, what can you say? But, I don't know. Like I said, but for me, life has been, last few years been pretty good. I was living in London for a number of years, and now I've moved north. And
also Newcastle ways.
Yeah, up in the Newcastle way. And, and like I said, in a lot of ways, I found the people of Newcastle a lot friendlier than the people of London. I mean, there were friendly people I met in London, but London just seemed
it's a bit too
busy and overwhelming. And particularly like on the tubes and stuff, you having been inside, you don't really like people leaning up on you. And the first time I had to get on the tube was coming from Heathrow, and people were like up on me. And everybody was concerned that I was going to just...
I was that, because it was, I tell you what, even though I was only away for 5 years, out of my own country, and I came back, I had this culture shock. Everything, I was looking at the differences instead of the similarities, and I was comparing everything, the prices, the people, the attitude, the food, everything was getting like,
Yeah.
it was just horrible. You know, the culture shock that I suffered, like. So for you to be away for over 60 something years,
Yeah.
get deported.
Yeah, well, like I said, it was funny because when I got notified in 2006 that I was going to be given an immigration hold to be deported. I go, okay, and so I'm expecting it's going to happen real quick, and of course it doesn't. And so I kept telling people over the years. I told them, look, I'm from the Isle of Man. My back arms say Manx bread, and stuff like that. And I've got my 3 legs under my arm here, and all that. And when I finally got the notification that I'm a British citizen and I'm going to be deported, I had guys that took attitude with me about, oh man, I thought you were an American all this time. I thought you were just lying. So it was like they were all right with me lying that I was a Brit, but they didn't like the fact that I became a Brit. I mean, because I actually had where people would stick things on my door like a bulldog with a hanging noose, a little paper thing like that, or go home lobster back, Limey, we don't want you here. We beat you in 1776. Things like this. I'm like, but I'd go, okay, so who put the stuff? And nobody would come up and say, oh, raise their hand, But yeah, there was quite a few people that took a real offense that I was going to be deported. And when I finally got found suitable the first time, the governor took my date and made me wait 4 more years for nothing. When I filed against it, he said, well, because I can. And I'm like, what? That's not a legal precedent. You have the right to take a date if I've done something, not just because you can. But the court said, well, the governor's got his rights, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, 4 years later, I get my date back, goes before the same governor. I'm thinking, this guy's going to do me again. He doesn't. I get turned over to Immigration and Custom Enforcement. So I'm sitting in the detention center there in Sacramento. There's all of these Hispanic guys. There's some Africans, some Middle Easterners, Asians. They don't want to stay. So they are offered the right to do asylum packets. So they come in, and the ICE guys would give them a 100-page packet and say, fill this out in English. Well, first off, some of the Mexican guys can't even write in Spanish, let alone in English. They can't understand the questions. So I sat down and started filling these things out. I had over 40 of them completed and in the courts within 2 months. And I had more than half of those granted. And I had this ICE guy come in and tell me, look, if you don't stop doing that, I'm going to kick your ass. And I tell him, look, I've had my ass kicked before. It's probably going to get kicked again. If that's what you got to do. He goes, well, why don't you stop this? I said, well, then send me home. So I go before the immigration court judge on telly. He's on a telly. And he goes, I've got one question for you, Mr. Kane. I said, okay. He goes, do you fear for your life if we send you to London? And I'm thinking, with my background at places I've been, what's going on in London that I don't know about? And I tell him, I said, no, I don't think so. Unless you know something about London, I don't. He goes, nope, but that's good. Because that was the question. The other guy's saying, I'm going back to Colombia. Got cartels will kill me. So I absolutely, but he goes, yeah, do you fear for your life if we send you to London? And I'm like, no. But I'll tell you what was the bad part was there was a period of time when we didn't know if Britain was going to accept me because they acknowledged I was British, but because I'd been gone so long, they actually had stated they might not let me come back. And the American government says, well, you ain't staying. And the American government had filed with the United Nations refugee relocation thing, program, whatever. And I had actually been accepted to be sent to Kyrgyzstan if the UK would not. And I had to actually look to see where Kyrgyzstan was, right? And it's like above Afghanistan.
The nice one.
And I'm thinking, they said that the UN would give them so much money, I wouldn't have any documents, but I would be allowed to go there. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to steal me a camel. I'm going to have to ride all the way across the Asian. I'm going to have to get across Europe. I'm going to have to swim the English Channel just to kick somebody in the bollocks there at the Home Office. I was like, I couldn't believe it. And then at the last moment, there was a push by Prisoners Abroad.
Yeah.
Because I was their longest client. And I was 17 years their client. I know you had dealings with them.
I did, yeah. But great people.
They did great for me. And when I got back over, they were there for me and stuff, and it was really good. But when I sent them the paper, they immediately filed. I can't say it's an appeal, but it was like a notice of discontent or something with the Home Office saying, we've shown you he didn't leave the U.S. because that was their argument was, did I leave the U.S. Leave the UK on my own, or did I go for some other reason? And I kept pointing out I was 6 months old, not like I had a lot of choice, but it was the same thing as the U.S. kept saying, well, so why did you have people smuggle you into the U.S.? I told them I was a year old. I said, I don't think I had any involvement with people doing anything. And they kept saying, well, you don't think it's unusual? I was a year old. It's like people go, well, how come you don't sound English? I was 6 months old. I didn't think I was talking at all. I don't have an accent because and of course my accent is usually the thing that draws people to me. So my most common answers I give people when they go, where'd you get that accent? I'll go, Primark. I went down the accent aisle, try this one out, see how it goes. Or if people go, or are you American? I'll go, no, I'm not American. Oh, you're Canadian. Yeah. I said, no, I'm not Canadian. So they go, where are you? So I'm Manx. And they go, Manx? I said, I'm from the Isle of Man. They go, is that a Manx accent? I said, no, it's not. I said, it's an American accent, but it's not. I'm not from America. So I'll play these things, but it opens up for me to tell my story to people and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, I've had a really good reception from people I've talked to over here. And matter of fact, because I have a website, JamieMorganKane.com, that people can go on to and read my story, and then they can send messages through it. And there's somebody who ministers it for me because I'm not that techie yet. I get a lot of messages. Well, I had a few people from the Isle of Man that contact me that way from having read my book or seen some of my YouTube videos. And a couple of them have become real good friends. And it was one of them that was the one that says, you got to get a hold of Billy.
Yeah.
And so he actually came over here to Liverpool to see some of his mates to tell them to try to get a hold of you and stuff. And it was like, that's great and stuff. And
that's how it works.
Yeah, well, it is. It's how it works. Things. But like I said, and then like I said, so I he had me when we were over there. He had us watch a few of your podcasts and stuff. And I saw that you were like really a down to earth type guy, which is it's funny because when I see some of the podcasts that people have said, "Here, watch this one." It's the guy that's like, he thinks he's a little bit better than whoever he's interviewing.
Yeah, I'm on him.
Yeah. And then there's guys that you can just sit down and talk to, and you can have a pint with them, and just that type of thing. And so so it was just this thing. So, but like I said, so we came down yesterday and saw a little bit of Liverpool and stuff, and then today we went down and I did a touristy magic mystery bus tour, and I got some photographs and stuff, and we're gonna go back down because we got tickets to the Cavern Club. So we've got free tickets to go, so we're going to go to that and see if I'll spend about 4 more hours or so down there. Sometime tomorrow we'll leave. We might go back in Liverpool a little bit in the morning before we leave to go back up. But I mean, this time of my life now, I'm trying to enjoy as much as I can, not be under a lot of stress. But like I said, I've got that first book out now, and my second book is coming out 28th of April. And I've got a couple more manuscripts in the works and stuff.
So I've read a few of the reviews on this book, by the way, people, and it's absolutely incredible. It's had over 800 reviews.
Is it?
Which is, yeah.
So, it's been 60,000 copies in 2 years.
Has it? Yeah, so it's done well. So, well, obviously it's an eye catcher in 34 years in hell. Inside America's toughest prisons, did you come across any hairy moments that were really life-threatening? You must have.
Oh yeah. No, there were some, and like I said, and interesting thing is that I bear the scars from those. I don't know if you can see, but the scar on my face here,
I see it.
And right now across my nose, it's filled up. But I got slashed across the nose and across the back of the hand. And in the book, I talk about when I got told that people were going to move on me on the yard at San Quentin. And one of the guys in my wing gave me some National Geographic magazines and newspaper and gaffer tape, and I made arm
Yeah.
shields. And even with that, one of the knives went through the National Geographic into my arm by about a quarter of an inch. And I mean, if you know how thick a National Geographic is, how much effort had to go in, so there were times, but because I stood up for a lot of people and of different races and stuff, there were times when things weren't necessarily going to go well, that suddenly I found I had people there to back me up.
Yeah.
And that kind of changed the thing, because when people think, oh, he's all by himself, they get a little bit braver, especially if they got a few numbers. And I was told that one time by one of the white guys in prison who was a shot caller for one of the little groups, is that they had attacked an older guy who was like in his 70s, and they'd sent 8 guys to attack this guy. And he had one time had been somebody in one other group, but he retired. He was old and retired. And they said, well, there's no honor in losing a fight, so we have to come deep enough that we always win. And I thought, it's kind of like the thing about the Whitey Bulger thing. Yeah. He's in a wheelchair, 3 guys go and stab him up. To me, my idea of honor and stuff is a whole different, than that. But I think one of the things that really gave me an edge was because of the fact that I was willing to really make people understand that I would, if it came down to it, I would do everything I could to hurt them as hard and fast as I could. And interesting enough, people don't want to be hurt. And particularly if you talk about crippling somebody. You talk about putting somebody in a wheelchair. Youngsters understand wheelchair. If you say, I'll kill you, they don't think about much. Wheelchair, they realize that's going to change their life. And, so, but yeah, I mean, even just before I was getting out, when I was back up at Old Folsom, I had, 3 guys, attack me with a mop wringer and stuff, and mop bucket and stuff like that. But the thing was, they were young guys hoping to make some kind of name for themselves and stuff. And like I said, but there were other guys nearby that came rushing over and get involved. So, but luckily, most of the violence that I was involved in was within the first 5-6 years of my time. After that, it was more about me just stepping up and saying, look, this isn't going to happen. Is it that important to you guys that you really want to take it here? And since I didn't do the drugs, I didn't get involved in the gangs, and I didn't do all this stuff. And interesting enough, like I said, my when I was attached to the Marines, my gunnery sergeant used to always tell you, hold your mud. And other people might know of it as stand your ground, but with the Marines, we were always in mud. So it was the idea of hold your mud. So my thing is that all of my injuries are on my front side because I'd put my back against something and I'd face people. So,
Some hairy moments.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, number of times I had, got guys crack me, with, like I said, mop wringer, stabbed, sliced, a few times a couple of different guys rushed up on me to fight. Luckily, I can say is that most of the guys I had to fight didn't know how to fight. And that's why they were playing 2 and 3 thing. Yeah. I mean, I had a guy hit me one time in the chest, and I seriously looked at him and said, what was that? And he says, my best hit. And I told him, that you better go and work on that one because that's not going to do any good. I mean, but I was bigger than I am now. I mean, I was coming up close to 19-inch arms, and, and I was, at one point I was, 210 pounds and, and stuff. But I mean, now even at 68 years old, I carry myself reasonably well. I just had a full total left knee replaced 6 months ago, and the doctors were amazed. 2 days of paracetamol, 4 days on crutches, and I've been out going up and down hills and walking everywhere and everything. And when I had my first review with them 6 weeks after, they go, well, how are you're not having a problem? No, I'm not having a problem. And so they were just amazed. But they tried to give me like codeine and all these other, so I don't need any of that stuff, And so, and I guess for me, part of it is just that throughout my whole life, I've always been come up against some kind of a conflict or some kind of a wall that I've had to get through, round, over, under, whatever. And so I just keep pushing forward. I mean, I don't think I know how to just give up and quit.
Yeah.
You know, that's not part of, what I mean, even the lady that raised me, she gave me the thing about, you're a man of the isle, a son of the sea, and a brother of the storm. And I checked, when I first got back, I checked and saw that the day I was born on the isle in 54, it was 6 degrees, extreme windy and stormy. So even then the storms were welcoming me into the world. But yeah, I mean, for me, I don't know where life's going to take me. I don't know what more I can look forward to, but I'm going to do the best I can. And I try to make the people around me, happy. And I try to help people with projects, whether it's building a planter box or, painting a house or, whatever. But yeah, I mean.
So you're always trying to be a benefit.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But it's just important in life these days. I feel like being of service to others is
being of service is something I've like I said, I've always tried to be. And, but like with me, like I tell people, I try to be a better man today than I was yesterday. And without trying to tell people how they have to live their lives, if I can benefit them by giving them any of my lifetime experience, I don't have a problem sharing with them, because quite honestly, I think in a lot of ways, particularly the youth, are very misguided and lost today, more so than my day. I mean, but I really hope that things get better. But times, they say, are changing.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end now.
Yeah.
So at the end of every podcast, Jamie, I always ask my guests, have you got any pearls or wisdom to offer to the audience? If there's anything you'd say to a young Jamie Morgan Kane walking through the doors of life, if you had the opportunity to speak to yourself, your younger version, what guidance would you give yourself?
I think what I would tell him, because I've used this before, was no matter what other people may say about you or to you, believe in yourself, because there's more to you than you can even imagine. And quite honestly, you can accomplish just about anything you want to if you apply yourself. And don't be worried about what people might think because you want to go down this path or that path. You've got to find the path that's right for you. It may not be right for others, but believe in yourself, because if you believe in yourself, you're going to get there. You really are.
And with that, we can get this book on Amazon. Yeah,
Amazon. It can still be got. It can be ordered through W.H. Smith and Waterstones and stuff. And then, like I say, the next book is Behind the Granite Walls, and that comes out on the 28th. And so this is available in ebook and audiobook as well right
brilliant.
Now.
Okay, that's brilliant. Yeah. I'll put all the links in the description to all, the books and your website.
Yeah.
If you want to get in touch with Jamie, you can.
Go to JamieMorganKane.com. And like I said, read the story. There's also YouTube videos out there, including the first one when I first went back to the Isle of Man for the first time.
Yeah, brilliant.
In 64 years at the time, and it's a bit emotional. It's all that. And when we got a couple of videos coming up, and like I said, we're going back to the Isle of Man in June, and I'm going to be my first TT, in memory. So
brilliant. And with that, thank
right.
you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you.